So imagine waking up one day and everything that could possibly kill you just suddenly exists. Not gradually, but just boom, it is there. That's basically what happened 540 million years ago. Before this moment, life was boring. Like, aggressively boring. Just blobs and mats of slime sitting around doing nothing. But then something happened. Something that made the ocean go from a quiet retirement home to a full-blown horror movie. And the weirdest part, we still don't fully know why it happened. We just know that when it did, Earth became a nightmare. And somehow, that nightmare built everything alive today, including you. This is the story of the Age of the Living Nightmares, aka the Cambrian Explosion. Okay, so before we get to the nightmare part, we need to talk about what Earth was actually doing before all of this happened. And the answer is going to disappoint you. Nothing. The Earth was literally doing nothing at all. For most of Earth's history, life was basically a green film on rocks. That's it. Single cells doing single cell things. Bacteria just floating around making oxygen and not much else. And this went on for billions of years, which is an amount of time your brain can't actually process. Just slime and waiting. But then around 635 million years ago, things got slightly less boring. And I mean slightly. You had these creatures called the Edicarian biota showing up, which sounds impressive until you see what they actually were. Pancakes, just flat, squishy things sitting on the ocean floor. Some looked sort of frond-like, waving gently in the current. Others were disc-shaped. One of them, Dickinsonia, was basically a quilted mattress pad that somehow qualified as alive. Nothing had a mouth, nothing had eyes, nothing had any way to actually do anything. These things just absorbed nutrients through their skin and hoped for the best. The ocean floor was covered in thick bacterial mats, so they would just lay on top of that and exist. No predators, no hunting, no real movement, just existing. And scientists spent decades trying to figure out what these things even were. Were they early jellyfish? Early worms? Something completely different? Well, it turns out some of them might have been their own thing that just doesn't exist anymore, which is kind of sad if you think about it. Imagine being so boring that evolution just gives up on your entire body plan. But while this was happening, Earth itself was changing. Oxygen levels were going up. See, all of those bacteria had been pumping out oxygen for ages, but it kept getting absorbed by rocks and iron in the ocean. The plant was basically rusting, but eventually around 800 million years ago, there was enough oxygen that it started building up in the water and the air. And that matters because complex life needs oxygen. You can't really have muscles or nerves or brains without it. Also, the supercontinent Rodinia was breaking apart, which meant you suddenly had a bunch of new coastlines, new shallow seas, and new places for life to spread into. Also, what's weird is in researching for this video, I ended up with like 60 tabs open. One for each weird animal, one for every scientific paper I'm not gonna actually read, and one for a Reddit thread where someone's convinced it's all fake. Yes, prehistoric animals is fake. Sorry, bud. Anyways, my browser is always a total disaster, and that's why I'm happy to tell you that this video is sponsored by Opera Browser, and they have this thing called tab islands that actually fixed my problem. You just hover one tab over another and they group together. So now I've got one island for Cambrian creatures, one for terror birds, and one for all the prehistoric sloth stuff I've been looking at. I love sloths. When you click a link, it opens on the same island, and you can collapse them or expand them as needed. It's just cleaner. They also have split screen, where you drag a tab down and the screen splits in two. I can have a reference image of whatever nightmare creature on one side and my script on the other. It's way better than clicking back and forth between tabs or using multiple browser windows, which I have done a lot. There's also tab traces, which shows these little colored underscores under your tabs. So when you've got 30 tabs open, you can actually see which ones you used recently. The darker the underline, the more recent the tab. It's helpful when you've been staring at pictures of Anomalocaris for 45 minutes and forgot where you were. And there's also a detachable music player. It works with 7 streaming services available, and you can move it anywhere, even outside the browser. And it pauses automatically when you start a video. And the best part, Opera's free, and you can get started today with my link that's in the description in the pinned comment below. Thank you so much to Opera for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back into some scary creatures that genuinely look photoshopped because they are so crazy. Sea levels were rising, the climate was warming up after some intense ice ages, and Earth was basically setting the stage without knowing it. And then, right at the end of the Edicarian, something weird started happening. Tiny shells began showing up in the fossil record, little mineral tubes and caps. some creature figured out how to build armor out of calcium. Then you started seeing burrows in the sediment. Actual tunnels where something had been digging around, which meant there were animals with muscles and a sense of direction, moving through the seafloor on purpose. This is what paleontologists call the three-phase buildup. Phase 1 was the Edicarian pancake creatures. Phase 2 was the small shelly fauna, which is what scientists call it when they find tiny mysterious shells and have no idea what animal they came from. And Phase 3 was when trilobites showed up and things got real. But here's the thing that nobody can fully explain. Why then? Earth had oxygen before, it had oceans before, it had single-celled life for literally billions of years. So why did complex life suddenly explode into existence 540 million years ago and not, say, like a billion years ago or 200 million years ago? There are theories, in fact there's lots of them. Maybe oxygen finally crossed some threshold. Maybe some genetic toolkit evolved that let bodies get more complex. Maybe the Edicarian creatures went extinct and cleared out space for new things. Maybe all of it happened at once. Scientists are still arguing about it in conference rooms with bad coffee and PowerPoint presentations. What we do know is that something was building. The ocean was getting ready, and then over the next 20 million years, basically every type of animal that exists today just appeared. Not slowly, not gradually building up over hundreds of millions of years, just boom. Suddenly there are eyes and teeth and claws and shells and things that want to eat other things. The Cambrian explosion wasn't actually an explosion. It took millions of years, but in geological time, which moves at the pace of continental drift and mountain building, it might as well have been instant. And when it finally happened, it changed everything about how life worked on this planet. And what came out of it was completely unhinged. So let's talk about what actually evolved during the Cambrian. And I need you to understand that these animals look like someone gave a kindergartner a biology textbook and said, "Go crazy, buddy." First up, trilobites. These are probably the only Cambrian animal that you have heard of unless you're a super big prehistoric nerd. And they're basically the success story of the whole period. Trilobites were arthropods, which means they had exoskeletons and jointed legs. They looked sort of like underwater pill bugs, or roly-polies, with hard segmented shells that they could curl up into when threatened. And they were everywhere, hundreds of species. Some ate detritus on the seafloor, some swam around, and some burrowed. They had compound eyes, which at the time was cutting-edge technology. Trilobites were so common that when paleontologists find Cambrian rock, it's usually just packed with trilobite shells. They molted their exoskeletons as they grew, so one trilobite could leave behind dozens of fossils over its lifetime. They're basically the pigeons of the Cambrian, successful everywhere, and nobody thinks they're special anymore. In fact, they are so common that the area I grew up in Saskatchewan in Canada, where I grew up on a farm, we would commonly find trilobite fossils in our fields when we were plowing the fields. Kind of a niche fact, but that's my personal experience with trilobites. But then you have the stuff that scientists genuinely didn't know what to do with. Anomalocaris. This thing was the apex predator of the Cambrian oceans. It grew up to a meter long, which doesn't sound huge until you realize everything else was the size of your thumb. It had a soft segmented body with flaps on the side for swimming, two long spiny arms in front for grabbing prey, and a mouth shaped like a pineapple ring lined with teeth. When scientists first found Anomalocaris fossils, they thought they discovered three separate animals. The mouth was labeled as a jellyfish, the grabbing arms got labeled as a shrimp, and the body was called something else entirely. It took decades before someone realized all these parts belonged to one deeply strange predator. It had enormous eyes on stalks, could swim fast, and it definitely ate trilobites, which we know because paleontologists have found trilobite shells with bite marks that match Anomalocaris' mouth exactly. Then there's Hallucigenia, which is named that because when scientists first saw it, they thought they were hallucinating. It's a tiny worm-like creature covered in spines with weird tentacle legs underneath. And for years, museums displayed it upside down because nobody could figure out which end was the head or what was even happening. They thought it walked on its spines, but turns out the spines were on its back for defense and those weird tentacles were actually legs. The name stuck though, which is fair because even right side up, it looks absolutely deranged. Opabinia might be worse because it has 5 eyes on top of its head. Not 2, not 4, but 5, plus a long flexible proboscis coming out of its face with a claw at the end for grabbing food. When paleontologist Harry Whittington presented Opabinia to a scientific conference in the 1970s, the audience laughed. They genuinely thought it was a joke, but no, it was real. It swam through Cambrian oceans, vacuuming up food with its face hose. and everyone just had to accept that. These animals were preserved in places called Lagerstatten, which is a fancy German word for really good fossil sites. The most famous one is the Burgess Shale in Canada. This deposit formed when an underwater landslide buried an entire marine community in fine mud. The lack of oxygen means that nothing decayed, so even soft body parts turned into fossils. Without the Burgess Shale, we'd only know about animals with hard shells. We would have no idea that things like Opabinia or Hallucigenia even existed, which means there were probably hundreds, if not thousands, of other soft-bodied Cambrian animals that just left no trace at all when they died. The ones we know about might be just the ones that got lucky enough to die in the right mud. And looking at what got preserved, you have to wonder what the unlucky ones looked like. But these things didn't just sit around looking weird. The minute these animals appeared, they started killing each other, which had never really happened before on Earth. Sure, bacteria probably ate other bacteria, but that's not the same thing. This was deliberate. Anomalocaris was hunting trilobites. There was worms ambushing smaller worms. There was actual predation with intent. And once that started, evolution had to respond fast. Here's what happened. Some animals figured out how to hunt. Maybe it gets better vision or faster swimming or arms that can grab. And suddenly everything around it is in danger. So the things getting eaten have two options: die or develop something that makes them harder to eat. The ones that develop defenses survive and breed. The ones that don't become lunch, survival of the fittest. So prey gets better at not dying, which means the predators that can't adapt start starving, which means they either evolve better hunting tools or they go extinct. Then prey has to respond to that and on forever until we get to where we are today. This is what we call an evolutionary arms race, and the Cambrian was the first real time it ever happened, at least the first time that we can see it clearly in the fossil record. Trilobites started growing spines, just long, sharp spikes jutting out of their shells at weird angles. Why? Because something was trying to eat them, and spines make you harder to swallow. Some trilobites got so spiky that they look like underwater cacti, which is a terrible design for swimming, but a great design for not being food. Shells got thicker, animals that had soft bodies started secreting calcium carbonate or calcium phosphate, building armor around themselves. Snails got shells, brachiopods got shells, even some worms started making little tubes to hide in. And this was happening everywhere, all at once across the entire ocean. Meanwhile, predators had to keep up. Anomalocaris developed that circular mouth with inward pointing teeth. Other animals developed claws or pincers. Some got powerful jaws. Anything that was able to crack open a shell had an advantage. But here's where it gets really interesting. Eyes. Before the Cambrian, nothing had real eyes. Maybe some light sensitive patches that could tell you if it was day or night, but actual image forming eyes with lenses, that's new, and it changed everything. Trilobites had compound eyes with multiple lenses. Anomalocaris had huge eyes on stalks with thousands of individual lenses, and was probably able to see in detail from far away. Some Cambrian fossils from Australia preserve these eyes so well that you can count the individual faucets. Over 16,000 lenses in some species even. That is better vision than most modern insects. Think about what that means. If you're a predator and you can just suddenly see your prey from across the sea floor, you're unstoppable. But if you're prey and you can see the predator coming, you can run. So now both sides needs to get faster and smarter and more aware. Vision probably triggered half of the Cambrian explosion by itself, because once one animal can see, everything else needs to see or it dies. It's not optional anymore. Then there's burrowing. Animals figured out that they could hide underground or underwater, technically since everything's underwater, but it's under the seafloor. So it's like underground, underwater. You get what I mean. They could dig into the seafloor sediment and wait for danger to pass. This had two effects. One, it created a new habitat. Suddenly there's a whole three-dimensional underground world where animals can live. Two, it completely destroyed the sea floor. Remember those thick material mats from the Edicarian? Well, they're gone now. Worms and other burrowers churned through the sediment constantly, breaking up the mats and mixing oxygen deep in the mud. This is called bioturbation, which is a great word. It means makes a mess of the ground. And it had a huge effect because oxygenated sediment can support more life. So burrowing made more habitat, which allowed more animals, which did more burrowing, which made more habitat. It is a positive feedback loop, and some predators learned how to burrow too, because if prey is hiding underground, you need to be able to dig them out. So then prey had to burrow deeper or develop harder shells that work underground, and the arms race continued even in the sediment. You see how this goes? It's always an arms race. All of these innovations fed back into each other. Predators drove prey to evolve defenses, defenses drove predators to evolve better weapons, eyes drove speed, speed drove agility, burrowing drove counter-burrowing. Every adaptation created pressure for new adaptations. And the really weird part is that all of this was happening in the ocean. Life hadn't even tried to evolve on land yet. There were no plants, no insects, no animals walking around. The continents were barren rock. All of this violence and innovation was happening underwater while this land sat empty. But underwater was enough, because in just 20 million years, the Cambrian went from some animals exist to every major body plan exists, and they're all fighting each other. The ocean went from a quiet place where nothing much happened to an active war zone where you needed armor, weapons, and eyes just to make it through the day. And somehow, out of all of that chaos, something functional emerged. That chaos built something that actually worked. So with all of these animals running around eating each other, the ocean accidentally created structure. Not on purpose, but when you have predators and prey and scavengers all existing in the same place, you end up with the food chain whether you meant to or not. At the bottom, you had filter feeders, sponges, brachiopods, some arthropods with feathery appendages. They would pump water through their bodies and catch tiny particles, the dead stuff, bacteria, bits of algae, just sitting there filtering all day. It is not glamorous work, but someone has to do it. Then you had grazers, which were trilobites mostly, crawling across the seafloor, eating whatever organic film that they could find. Some had specialized mouth parts for scraping, others just shoveled sediment into their mouths and filtered out the good bits. It is very efficient, but again, not very dignified. Above them were the predators. Well, different tiers of predators actually. Small ones eating worms, medium ones eating arthropods, and big ones like Anomalocaris eating basically whatever it wanted. And each tier controlled the population of the tier below it. Scavengers filled in the gaps. When something died, stuff showed up to eat the corpse. Certain worms, some arthropods, probably trilobites too since they weren't really picky. Nothing went to waste here. Dead animals got recycled back into the food chain immediately. This is a real functioning ecosystem. Multiple levels, energy moving up from the bottom, predators keeping prey populations in check, and it's the first time that this structure appeared on Earth. Before the Cambrian, you didn't really have this. You had bacteria eating bacteria, and that's about it. Maybe some Edicarian things filtered nutrients, but there was no hunting, no hierarchy, no real food chain. Just everyone doing their own thing. But Cambrian oceans had rules. If you were small and slow, something ate you. If you were big and fast, you ate other things. Your position in the ecosystem determined what you did all day, and that's how it still works. Modern oceans have the same basic setup: filter feeders, grazers, predators, scavengers, different animals filling in the same roles. The Cambrian invented this template, and everything since has just been another variation of it. There were even reef builders, not corals, those came later, but archaeophythans, which were sponge-related animals with hard calcium carbonate skeletons shaped vaguely like cups and cones. They would grow in colonies, building up into reef structures a few meters tall. These reefs created habitat for other animals, small arthropods hiding in the crevices, trilobites living around the base, and probably worms and other soft things that we never found fossils of. Reefs concentrate life, so one reef might support dozens of different species. It's an ecosystem within an ecosystem. And again, this is the first time anything had built a reef. Before the archaeophythans, there were just stromatolites, which were those layered mounds of bacteria. Technically, those are reefs too, but they're not animal built. Archaeophythans were the first animals to change their environment by building structures, which is a big deal. The vertical dimension mattered too. Some animals lived on the sea floor. Others burrowed under it. Some swam just above the bottom. Others swam higher up in the water column. A few might have been near the surface, though most Cambrian animals stayed deep where predators from above weren't a thing yet. This layering meant more niches, more ways to make a living, and more ways meant more species, because different animals could specialize in different depths without competing with each other directly. By the middle of the Cambrian, you could drop into a shallow sea and find dozens of species within a few square meters. Filter feeders on the rocks, grazers on the sediment, predators cruising overhead, scavengers waiting for something to die, everything connected, everything dependent on everything else. It was a fully operational ecosystem, the first one Earth ever had, and it only took 20 million years of non-stop violence to build it. But obviously, none of this could have lasted. Because about 10 million years into the Cambrian, something went wrong. The reef builders started dying. Those Archaeoscythians that had been constructing reefs across shallow tropical seas just stopped showing up in the fossil record within a relatively short window. They were gone, completely extinct. And they took a bunch of trilobites with them. Entire families were vanished. The Olonids in North America were gone. The red lichids in other parts of the world also gone. These were successful animals that had been thriving, and then they weren't. Scientists call this the Mid-cambrian extinction event, which is a polite way of saying a lot of things died and we're not totally sure why. Our best guess? The ocean cooled down. Maybe ocean currents shifted and brought cold water up from the deep. Cold water can have less oxygen in it, and Archaeoscythians need warm, oxygen-rich water to survive. When temperatures dropped, they couldn't handle it. Reefs collapsed. Species that depended on those reefs for habitat went with them. There also might have been a drop in the sea level. Water pulled back from the continents, shrinking the shallow shelf environments where most Cambrian life lived. Less habitat means less space, which means more competition, which means more extinctions. But here's the weird part. After this extinction pulse, diversity actually went up. Not immediately, but within a few million years, new types of animals appeared to fill the gaps. Different trilobites evolved, new predators showed up. It's almost as if the extinction cleared out space and let new things try their luck. The ocean restabilized, sea levels came back up, and life kept going. But the end of the Cambrian brought another round of problems. Around 486 million years ago, the climate shifted again. This time, it got cold. And by cold, I mean really, really cold. Ice sheets formed on the southern supercontinent Gondwana. Glaciers covered parts of what's now Africa and South America. When water freezes into ice sheets, it pulls water out of the ocean, so sea levels drop. Shallow seas drain off continental shelves, and suddenly all of those coastal habitats where the Cambrian animals lived are just gone. And you get dry land or deep water, with nothing in between. A lot of species couldn't adapt fast enough. Trilobites took another hit. Various groups of small shelly animals disappeared completely, and the big charismatic predators, well, most of them died out entirely. Anomalocaris doesn't appear in Ordovician rocks, neither do most of other radiodonts. They just stop. You go from fossils showing up regularly in Cambrian deposits to nothing. These were apex predators that had dominated for tens of millions of years, and they couldn't survive whatever happened at the boundary. Same with a lot of the weird body plan creatures. Opabinia, gone. Hallucigenia and other Lopodians, mostly gone, except for a few lineages that eventually became velvet worms and maybe tardigrades. The really bizarre experimental designs that made the Burgess Shale so famous didn't even make it out of the Cambrian. What survived were the generalists, trilobites that could handle different temperatures and food sources, brachiopods that weren't too picky about depth, mollusks that could adapt their shells. The survivors weren't necessarily the coolest or the biggest. They were just flexible enough to handle change. And once the Ordovician started, those survivors went wild. Trilobites diversified into hundreds of new species. Brachiopods took over huge sections of the sea floor. The first true corals appeared and started building reefs to replace the Archaeoscythians. Cephalopods showed up and some got huge, which were straight-shelled nautiloids several meters long cruising the open ocean. The Ordovician actually had higher diversity than the Cambrian. More species, more variety, more complex interactions, but it was building on what the Cambrian established. The body plans were already there. The Ordovician just refined them. And that's a pattern that kept repeating throughout Earth's history. Big diversification, then extinction, then the survivors diversify again. Each time there's a filter. Each time some lineages die out and others replace them, but the basic toolkit, the shells and eyes and segments and limbs stays the same. It just gets remixed. The Cambrian gave evolution the pieces. Everything after that was just rearranging them. But the fact that so many Cambrian animals died raises a question. If the weird ones couldn't survive climate change, were they actually successful, or were they just flash in the pan experiments that happened to get preserved in nice fossils? It's hard to say. Anomalocaris lasted 30 million years, which is a pretty good run. For comparison, most modern humans have only been around for maybe 300,000 years. We've got a long way to go before we match Anomalocaris. Yes, we're being beaten by a giant sea scorpion with shrimp arms. Still, there's something humbling about the fact that the apex predator of its time, this massive, well-adapted hunter with excellent vision and grabbing arms, just couldn't handle it when the temperature dropped a few degrees. Makes you wonder what small change could wipe out anything alive today, including you, by the way. You're not immune to extinction events just because you have a smartphone. But some things in the Cambrian never truly went away. Every animal alive today can trace its ancestry back to the Cambrian. Every single one. Fish, birds, lizards, mammals, insects, spiders, crabs, snails, starfish, sea urchins. All of them descend from something that was swimming around 500 million years ago. The body plans invented during the Cambrian are still the body plans that we use today. Bilateral symmetry, having a left and a right side, comes from Cambrian animals. Segmented bodies, jointed limbs, shells, internal skeletons, complex eyes, brains, guts with a mouth. All Cambrian innovations. Nothing fundamentally new has been invented since then. Everything after the Cambrian is just modifications. Birds are modified dinosaurs, which are modified reptiles, which are modified amphibians, which are modified fish. And fish are just modified versions of those tiny Cambrian chordates like Piakaya. Insects are modified versions of Cambrian arthropods. Snails are modified Cambrian mollusks. We're all just running on software that was written 500 million years ago. It's different versions, but the same code. The way ecosystems work, predators eating prey, scavengers cleaning up, filter feeders processing water, that's Cambrian too. The ocean invented those rules and then never changed them. Forests work the same way. Grasslands work the same way. Predator, prey, scavenger, decomposer. Same structure, different animals. And we still don't fully understand why it happened when it did. Oxygen levels were part of it, the breakup of continents probably helped, and the evolution of developmental genes that let bodies get complex. An extinction that cleared out the Etacarian creatures, all of those played a role. But there's something missing in that explanation, because you'd think if those were the only factors, it could have happened earlier or later. Why specifically 540 million years ago? Why not 600 million or 400 million? Well, some scientists think it was a perfect storm. Everything had to line up just right. Oxygen had to hit a certain level. Continents had to fragment at the right time. Genes had to evolve the right toolkit. And once it started, it was self-reinforcing. Predators drove prey to evolve, which drove predators to evolve more, and you get a runaway feedback loop. But still, that is just an educated guess. The honest answer is that we don't know, and we might never know for sure because we can't rerun the experiment. We only get one Earth. What we do know is that it worked. Life went from simple to complex and never went back. Even when extinction events killed most species, the survivors were still complex, still had eyes and brains and organs. Complexity became permanent, and all of it started because some worm figured out how to eat another worm. That decision, if you can even call it a decision, led to everything, every ecosystem, every food chain, every predator-prey relationship. All of it traces back to the Cambrian oceans where animals first started killing each other on purpose. All of this is to say that you exist simply because ancient shrimp had beef. That will forever be your legacy. If you enjoyed watching this video, make sure to give it a like and comment down below what other ages of the Earth's history you'd like me to talk about. We're doing a whole series on every single age that the Earth has seen with different animals in it, so I'd love to hear what you guys are suggesting. We're going to do the age of fish next. If you enjoyed this content, you should also subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on future uploads, and make sure to hit the hype button on this video as it helps this video get shown to more people just like you. Who knows, maybe you'll make some shrimp hating friends too. And if you want to watch another one of these videos, make sure to click the video on the screen now.